In this last lesson of the chapter, we're going to look at creating variables and constants. In this lesson, we're only going to be talking about local variables. There are several other types of variables, including class variables, global variables, just to mention two, and I'll bring those up as we get to them in the course. But right now, we're just going to be talking about very basic local variables and local constants. So let's get started by opening up the interactive Ruby shell. To create a constant, we simply provide a name and then a value using an assignment statement. For example, I can write number equals 100, and now the variable number holds the value 100. If I type the variable's name, it retrieves the value that's stored in that variable. There are a few rules to naming variables. First of all, a variable name must begin with a lowercase letter or an underscore. So for example, number works fine, or we could write underscore name as another variable, and I'll go ahead and make an assignment there. I personally don't like using underscores to begin variable names. Where underscores do come in handy is when we want to create a multi-word or compound word variable. For example, first name. I can use an underscore to separate the first word from the second word of the name. And that makes perfect sense. But using an underscore at the beginning of a variable just looks a little quirky to me, and I prefer not to use it. Another way to write compound variable names is using what's called camel casing, like this. Here, the compound word is separated by capitalizing the first letter of the second word, and you could continue for as many words as you need. The standard Ruby convention, however, is to use underscores to separate compound words, so you can use whichever method is more comfortable to you. Remember, this is only a style and not really a hard and fast rule, so underscores or camel casing can be used for compound word variables. After the first letter or an underscore, a variable can contain either other letters or numbers, but no other special symbols. The symbols on the keyboard, a lot of them have special meaning in Ruby, so you're best off not using them and saving them for their special use. And as we come across them, we'll discuss what special symbols are used. Just to give you an example, global variables are created by putting a $sign before the variable name, like this. Now, salary is a global variable that can be seen throughout our program. We'll talk more about global variables when we talk about variable scope. So to sum up the rules for variables, a variable has to begin with a lowercase letter or an underscore. Though like we said, it's best to begin with a lowercase letter. And then a variable name can contain other letters or numbers or the underscore character. The only other rule I would mention about variables is always try to make them meaningful. So in other words, rate equals 1.2 makes perfect sense, but r equals 1.2 doesn't quite make as much sense if you're not sure what r is really meant to represent. So always write out the word or some sort of mnemonic device when using variables. We're going to end this lesson by talking about constants. And constants are variables that hold the same value throughout a program, although in Ruby that's a kind of an iffy proposition in that you can reassign constants. The way we write a constant in Ruby is to write it in all uppercase letters, like so. We have defined pi now as a constant that holds the value 3.14159. Constants are written in all uppercase so that they're called out or easily distinguishable in a program, so that when you're scanning a program listing, you see a variable in all uppercase and you know right away that that's a constant. That's a style convention that's been used for many, many years, although in some languages it's becoming less and less common. One of the differences with Ruby and constants in other languages is that you can actually reassign a constant in Ruby, like this. Notice it did change the value, but it gave me a warning saying that pi is an already initialized constant. However, as you can tell by its return value, that it did actually change the value. So you just need to be aware that even though you can define constants in Ruby, you can also change their value, which makes you wonder if they really should be called constants. But that's neither here nor there. That's really all there is to say about constants. Understand that they're used because you want that object to hold the same value throughout the program. By writing it in all uppercase, you're making it clear to anybody else reading the program that that variable is actually a constant and its value should not change. So with that, we're finished with this lesson on constants and variables, and we're ready to move on to the exercise for this chapter.